Welcome to Fresh Off the Boat. My name is Arjun Seth, and I'm delighted to be chatting with Ariman Khandelwal. Ariman was a student I'd actually met when he was in Dubai, and then we worked for a couple of years before he applied to colleges. And he's currently a rising junior, I guess now. Yeah,
June.
rising junior at UCLA, doing a double major program. One is in statistics and econometrics and economics. So we also know that you're interested in theater, and adding that
Mhm.
theater minor sounds pretty cool for someone who's already got a very heavy course load. So my first question to you, Ariman, is how was it like settling in at UCLA, which is such a large school compared to your high school in Dubai?
For sure. Firstly, I would like to just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, especially in this podcast environment, because I think it'll be super helpful for students who are applying to colleges right now. So yeah, settling into UCLA, that's an interesting question because uh, it wasn't very sort of planned out for me. I didn't think it out in the sense that. You might remember me. I'm quite like a social person, and actually my uh, college trajectory was like completely different. I never thought that I would end up in UCLA, West Coast. I was completely East Coast centered. Brown University, NYU, those were like my dream schools. Uh, but once I reached UCLA, I found that settling in was definitely a challenge in the beginning. That balance, especially in the quarter system, coming into the quarter system was a bit challenging for me in the beginning. And I found it easier to make friends, but balancing that social life with the um, academic course load of the quarter system, especially with two majors, was definitely like a challenging aspect.
So that's
Uh,
a pretty honest reply. And I think when you sort of feel the pressure of being kind of the struggle also of sort of figuring things out academically, how did you sort things out? What were the resources you used? Writing
sure.
center or a academic advisor, even just chalking out your schedule and things like that. So tell us a
Sure.
little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So one of the major things that I used for my to develop myself was the academic, as you mentioned, the other academic counseling center at UCLA, and they were super helpful in the sense that they gave me a structure to my academic environment with classes and so with calculus and econ and all of these things, balancing it was definitely challenging. But working with the academic counseling unit, I found that I was able to find a rhythm to my workload and my studies. And slowly but surely, especially coming into the second year, I started to find my feet more in the academic environment as well as social environment. And I started to see much more like success in the classroom and outside as well.
Great. So when you went in thinking that you'd do economics, did you also sort of decide on doing that double major very soon once you were there? And how does it really work?
Honestly, like before, I mean, you must remember, like before applying to schools, I wasn't like econ or honestly STEM inclined at all. Like my dream school was like philosophy at Brown. That was like my ultimate dream. But I studied a bit of econ in high school. I took it at higher level in IB, and I found it quite engaging. So that's why I decided to pick up the econ at UCLA. Um, and while I started as just an econ major, I also found that the econ side of UCLA was quite theoretical, uh, which was good in a sense. But I was looking for a good balance between that theoretical and practical knowledge. And when I discovered the stats major at UCLA, the stats major is more real world applicable. They encourage students to apply what they've learned in the class outside of the class. We actually have like two upper div classes, which are purely based on statistical consulting. And so I really found that that double major complemented what I was looking for in an academic setting really well. And the education that I was learning in stats helped me in econ, and the things that I was learning in the econ major helped me in stats. So it sort of combined to form a really good academics environment for me.
So, UCLA and other large public universities are known for weeding out students, where you have an economics class which is capped anyways, so getting in is harder. Then you get weeded out if you don't do well. Was it really sort of like that for you as well?
I would say it's definitely like a competitive environment. I wouldn't lie about that. Like there's in UCLA there's a term called reader classes, which are classes. So okay, let's track back a bit. So you get admitted to UCLA as a pre-major. So I was admitted as a economics pre-major, and you have to take a certain number of classes and get a certain GPA, which before you can apply to the major and get into the major. So while doing the pre-major, there are these certain courses that are called reader courses, which are supposed to be like notoriously difficult for students to get through. Uh, and so the point is to weed out the students who are not really that inclined or interested in that field of study. I would say those classes are definitely competitive, but on the other hand, an advantage of having such a large class and such a large university in general is that there's a lot of bright minds as well. So you can work with those competitive people, work alongside them, learn from them, give your own guidance, and ultimately look to all of you succeed in the same setting, and all of you get into that major that you're looking to pursue.
Fantastic. So, if you were to describe econometrics to a layman, and then, like you said, it has enough statistics and math in it, anyways, what are the courses that you study, and what are the applications of the things that you learn in the real world?
Sure. So as a pre-major, we basically more so focus on the theory, the basic theory that will be needed at the upper div level. So Econ 1 and 2 are principles of micro and macroeconomics. So those are very like surface level supply and demand, and Econ 2 is more than we get into large nations, global economies. Then we have Econ 11, which is microeconomic theory, uh, where you go much more in detail into what you learned in Econ 1. And you do Econ 41, which is statistics for economists, which is where my stats major really came in, because I was able to apply what I learned in my stats classes directly into the econ major. And after that, you can really apply to become an econ major, which is where and then you start doing a lot more real world applications, which so Econ 103 is a course where you study econometrics in depth, which I found really valuable, because that was what I was there to study in the first place. And then you get into like higher level courses. Econ 150 plus is more like then you specialize in, like, for example, I'm specializing in value investing. So you do a lot of finance, you do a lot of investments, and that's where you learn the tools and techniques that like you will use in the real world when you go into the industry. So like, for example, I'm planning to go into the investment banking industry after school. So we do a lot of valuations, we do a lot of financial statements, and the things that like we tend to apply in the real world. We can learn those in Econ 150 plus.
So that's interesting, because you kind of got a path to investment banking, and then doing these sort of managerial finance, quantitative finance courses is useful.
Mm-hmm.
What are the other extracurriculars related to this path? Is there a finance club or a startup fund or something like that?
Yeah. So UCLA is like one of the, for me at least, the UCLA has like a ton of clubs. So we have over 1,000 clubs on campus, and anyone is free to open a club, which means that there's whatever you're looking to do, there's basically a club for that. So for example, there's a number of selective clubs at UCLA, which are completely focused on investment banking. So for example, we have Bruin Asset Management, Bruin Investment and Trading, as well as then you look at like consulting, so Bruin Consulting, and these are like highly selective clubs which you get into, and then you apply what you're learning in the classroom in those clubs, which really helps in the fact that you're able to understand how all of these things relate to one another. Which, and then when you graduate, it's more streamlined in the sense that you're able to um, really gain the knowledge of like how these things interact with one another. And so I would say like the clubs at UCLA have definitely helped me. Uh, Early on in freshman year, I joined like a few of these clubs, and now in sophomore year I've joined a few more of them. Um, and working with those, as I mentioned, working with the bright individuals on campus who are looking to pursue the same career as you really helps you like move forward with your interests and aspirations.
So how is it like for international students to then get internships at this point? Uh, was it something that you do in your rising junior year, or you're looking for working in the US or anywhere else later on?
Sure. So I'm looking to stay in the US after graduation, and actually stay in New York. Actually, is where I want to be. So for that, like I'm gonna start applying to investment banking internships now, like in a month or so. Um, and I would say like in the current economy, getting internships is difficult for like anyone, but it's especially even more difficult for like international students. So you've really got to be on top of your game in terms of like GPA, the clubs that you get into, the industry experience that you have. So, for example, I was lucky enough to get an internship in the beginning of sophomore year in a special purpose acquisition company, and I think that real world experience uh, will play a huge role in my internship applications. So I would definitely say that like it's getting a lot more difficult. But if you keep on top of your game, your GPA, and as I mentioned, like your experience, uh, it should definitely shine through to the recruiters in these companies and help you get those offers.
Sounds good. If you were to then, tell us a little bit about your theater minor, because I think that's interesting. Sort of takes your mind away from all the other stuff that
Sure.
you're studying or doing. How did that interest develop? What are you actually doing, and where do you see that being used in your finance world, if at all?
It's an out there one. Like whenever I tell someone that I'm doing a theater minor, they're always like, "What, really?" Um, but so I developed this like interest in theater in high school. Actually, like I was part of a few plays back in India as well, and then when I moved to Dubai, um, and that's when I discovered like that I liked being on stage. I liked acting. I liked like the process of finding a play, then going through that process of figuring out what the emotions of the character are and portraying that on stage. And so when I went into UCLA, I did a bit of research, and UCLA definitely is one of like the best schools for theater and film, uh, especially being in LA, which is like the hub of Hollywood. Um, you get a lot of exposure into bright instructors, bright guest lecturers. So I would say that like the theater minor, me picking it up was definitely an interesting choice, but it's really helped me. So like I've taken three theater classes right now out of the 8 which you need for the minor. And it's especially the one thing that I noticed is that I'm doing a lot of like quantitative stuff like econ and stats. I've been doing like multivariable calc in all my classes, and it can get a bit like stressful on the mind. So those theater classes have been like a good mental break for me where I can just go and be with my friends, just chill out and get credit for it, which is always nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about these classes. What have these been about? And the rest of the 4 or 5 that you'd want to end up doing, what would they be like?
Sure. So I took Theater 10 and Theater 20 are the 2 classes that you need to apply for the minor. And those Theater 10 and 20 classes are more about acting fundamentals. So you learn about like film acting and stage acting and those different principles that go into it. And it's a lot of it is also about that teamwork and collaboration that you are able, and that sense of camaraderie that you're able to build with your classmates. which I think is important in many fields, especially in like finance and investment banking. And at the end of each class, you build up towards a sort of performance. So, for example, previous quarter we built up towards the Peter Pan performance, and that's what we put up for so people could come in and watch. And that's really been helpful. It's, as I mentioned, it's been a good mental break. And then once you apply for the minor, you get into the minor, then you sort of tend to specialize in. Um, so I'm doing American musical and I'm doing Japanese musicals, and so that's when you learn the principles of what those musicals and the history of those theater stage performances were built upon, and you can really like go in depth in whichever field you prefer.
That's great. If you end up in any international financial capital, there's always Broadway, and there's West End and other theater districts in other parts of the world. So yeah, I think that I'm sure you'll be a lot more knowledgeable than any other investment banker. So well, all the best with that. I'm going to switch gears and ask you a few rapid fire questions, and
Sure.
just to get to know you a bit better. In this time of like lockdown and sort of, I'm sure a lot of in your mind as well as everyone else's mind has been self-reflection on things that you could improve about yourself, or things that you want to learn, improve, or whatever, work on productivity. So what are the 2 or 3 things that you're working on as self-improvement?
Sure, that's a great question. So in the current economy, like in the current situation, in the dual pandemic that we're going through in the US, actually, it's really taught me a lot about like self-reflection and my own thought process, as well as staying motivated. You know, like one of the biggest things for in the current situation is like just keeping your head up and honestly like getting up in the morning and finding why you're doing what you're doing. So I found that like that sense of keeping myself motivated is one of the biggest challenges for me. One of the big things that I've been doing nowadays is like taking a journal and like writing down 1 or 2 goals for the day, and then at the end like writing down what I achieved, and that's kept me like on top of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because especially when you read the news and you read Twitter and everything, it's difficult to like drown out all the noise and everything that's going around, and just keeping focus on your goals. And I found that like that journaling process has definitely helped me. Another thing with classes being online and me being in Dubai is and me being at home is time management has been the biggest thing for me. As a student, especially, I was take so in a quarter people usually take like 3 classes, and I've taken 5. So the course load has been a lot for me this quarter, and I didn't anticipate what was going to happen. So that time management process has been like super difficult for me, and especially like taking exams at 2:30 a.m., 5:30 a.m. So prioritization and time management is another skill that I've had to develop over this pandemic.
That's pretty interesting that, since it's on a quarter system, and I believe your classes just sort of ended with exams and everything else.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more experience than a semester student who sort of got over earlier. Do you think it could work, like continuing like this in the fall? What are the colleges thinking, and what do you think higher education needs to reimagine in terms of the future?
That's a great question, because as an international student, I've definitely had like different experiences in that, like waking up at 5:30 a.m. to take an exam, or waking up at 4 a.m. to take an exam has been like super strenuous. So I would definitely say that like one of the biggest things that schools and professors could try to understand is that like I completely understand that they're going through their own sets of challenges, but so are the international students, you know. So one of the biggest in fall, UCLA has adopted a hybrid system where like some classes are online and some classes are in person. And I know for me and a bunch of my international friends, this online learning process has been so strenuous on our like sleep schedule and everything, that like even though there's a global pandemic going on, we're just thinking of going back to LA in the middle of this pandemic, because we just want to take our classes at a reasonable hour and not have to do exams at like 2:30 a.m. So that's definitely like one of the biggest, I think, policy changes that UCLA can make. Obviously, I understand that we're in a minority, but um, it's important to understand that like even a minority like
Mhm.
deserves the same like curve and the same sort of like platform to succeed as a US student would. Yeah.
Absolutely, I think well said. It's obviously a very big challenge. Some schools have announced exams at their own pace and at home. So it's interesting that we live in these times. But I'm going to wrap up with asking you one question about influencers, people you follow, since you also have that interest in theater and math and econ. It's interesting that your choices for this answer could be varied. But
Yeah.
what is it that you like reading, following? So
Sure.
tell us.
So recently, I've been like a lot for a large part. I've been interested in like listening to podcasts and like all these finance shows that like discuss um, how we should invest in both ourselves and in the stock market in these current situations. So I started off with like, I don't know if you've heard about it, Dave Ramsey. He's like a finance influencer who's like, he's worked for a number of years in the finance industry, and listening to him has been like really helpful for me because he gives like real tips. He's very authentic to his own character. As well, there's a podcast in on Spotify called The Ground Up Show, hosted by Matt Diavella. And he discusses a variety of topics, not only finance. He discusses like fitness. He discusses mental health, and getting this broad brush understanding from experts who've dedicated their life towards the subject has been like super helpful for me as well, to gain an understanding of that. And reading, like for me, reading is like one of the best activities that I can do outside of school. So I read a lot of fiction, but as for nonfiction, I've recently picked up like Ben Graham's Value Investing book, and I've been on that Warren Buffett top 10 reading list, and that's really taught me a lot about like the stock market and investing and stuff. And yeah, so those are like things that I've been doing to keep focused.
Thank you, Araman, for sharing snippets from your life at UCLA, things that you're studying, and things that you're sort of looking forward to in the future. I hope all the issues related to sort of sorting out your academic scheduling and sort of hoping also that you can be back on campus soon. So with that, I just want to wish you all the best. We will be doing a few panels and webinars. I'd like to invite you for those. Loved your insights. And let's be in touch. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Arjun. It's been great. Yeah, great experience. Thank you.